July 15, 2020, 7:43 a.m. A bank security investigator named Patricia Chin sits at her desk at Regions Bank's Fraud Detection Center in Birmingham, Alabama. Her computer screen shows an alert. Account number ending in 4723. Unusual activity. A cashier's check for $90,218. The account belongs to an elderly customer in Baton Rouge. The customer didn't request it. Patricia picks up her phone. She's about to call the branch manager who processed the transaction. His name is Eric Jason Scost. He manages the Plank Road branch. He's been with Regions for 10 years. Trusted, reliable, a pillar of the local banking community. Patricia doesn't know it yet, but this phone call will unravel a scheme that's been running for months. A scheme that will ultimately cost customers over $250,000. A scheme that will end with a federal prison sentence. And it all starts with this one suspicious transaction that Shoest thought he could explain away. Eric Jason Scoest was 53 years old when federal agents arrested him in April 2024. He lived in Plaquemine, Louisiana, a small city of just over 7,000 people along the Mississippi River in Iberville Parish. Plaquemine sits about 10 miles south of Baton Rouge. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where reputations matter, where a bank manager is considered a respected member of society. Scoest had built that reputation over more than a decade. He started working at Regions Bank in 2010. By 2020, he was the branch manager of the Plank Road location at 5950 Plank Road in Baton Rouge. The branch sits at the corner of Plank Road and Denham Street, right in front of Plank Road Mall Shopping Center in East Baton Rouge Parish. It's a full-service branch. Scoest oversaw all business transactions and practices. He supervised other employees. He had access to every account, every system, every customer's financial life. The position came with responsibility, with trust, with the expectation that he would protect customer assets, not steal them. Scoest's job gave him extraordinary power over people's money. As branch manager, he could issue cashier's checks without additional approval. He could access customer account information. He could process withdrawals. He could communicate directly with bank security and other Regions Bank employees. He was the gatekeeper, the person customers trusted when they walked through the door. For 10 years, from 2010 through 2019, there's no evidence Scoest abused that trust. His performance reviews were solid, no complaints, no red flags. But something changed in early 2020. Maybe it was financial pressure. Maybe it was opportunity. Maybe it was both. Whatever the reason, Eric Scoest decided to start stealing, and he targeted the most vulnerable people in his branch, people who trusted him completely. The scheme began sometime in early 2020, right around the time the COVID-19 pandemic was transforming American life. Banks were closing lobbies, moving to drive-through only service. Everything was chaotic. Normal oversight procedures were disrupted. It was the perfect cover for someone planning fraud. Scoest started small, a withdrawal here, a check there. He tested the system. He watched to see if anyone noticed. Nobody did. So he got bolder. The method was simple but effective. Scoest would access customer accounts belonging to people who didn't check their statements frequently. He'd issue cashier's checks payable to himself or reroute legitimate checks to his personal bank accounts at other financial institutions. When questioned, he'd create forged documents showing customer authorization. He'd send false emails to other Regions employees explaining the transactions. He'd manufacture paperwork that made everything look legitimate. The beauty of the scheme from Scoest's perspective was his position. He was the branch manager. When he sent an email saying a transaction was authorized, people believed him. When he presented documents, nobody questioned their authenticity. He was the person who was supposed to catch fraud, not commit it. Court records show Scoest stole money from 4 different customer accounts. The victims weren't random. They were chosen specifically because they were unlikely to notice immediately. The prosecution never released the victims' names publicly, but the pattern is clear. These were customers who didn't monitor their accounts daily. Maybe elderly people who didn't use online banking. Maybe busy professionals who only looked at statements once a quarter. Maybe people who simply trusted their bank manager completely. Scoest exploited that trust systematically. In one case, He issued a cashier's check to close a customer's account, then pocketed the money. In another, he rerouted a check meant for a customer to his own account. Over and over, he repeated the same basic pattern. Access the account, create the fraudulent transaction, forge the authorization documents, move the money to his personal accounts, then use those stolen funds to pay for his own lifestyle expenses. What did Eric Skoas do with $250,000 stolen from trusting customers? He paid his bills. Specifically, court documents show he used the stolen money to make loan payments on his house and his car. These weren't luxury purchases, no yachts, no sports cars, no trips to Europe, just the mundane expenses of middle-class American life. A mortgage, a car payment, maybe credit cards, maybe utilities. The fraud wasn't about living large, it was about maintaining a lifestyle his legitimate salary couldn't support. Skoas earned a decent income as a branch manager, but maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe he had debts. Maybe he had expenses that exceeded his income. Maybe he looked at the hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing through his branch every day and thought nobody would miss a little. The financial analysis that would later be conducted by federal investigators would show a clear pattern. Money stolen from customer accounts on a specific date. Within days or sometimes hours, payments made to Skoas's creditors for the same amounts. The trail was obvious once anyone actually looked. But for months, nobody looked. Between February 2020 and April 2021, the scheme continued. Month after month, Skoas moved money from customer accounts to his own accounts, tens of thousands of dollars per month. The total would eventually reach $257,000, according to prosecutors. Some reports said the misappropriated amount exceeded $250,000. The exact figure would become part of the court record when Skoas finally stood before a federal judge. But for more than a year, the fraud continued undetected. Skoas went to work every day, greeted customers, supervised employees, attended meetings, processed legitimate transactions, and in between, he stole. The dual life must have been exhausting. Every time his phone rang, was it bank security? Every time a customer questioned a transaction, was this the moment it all fell apart? But the calls didn't come. The questions didn't come. He kept getting away with it. Until July 15, 2020. That's when Patricia Chen at Bank Security saw the alert. The $90,000 cashier's check. She called Skoas, asked about the transaction, wanted to know if it was legitimate. This was the moment Skoas had been dreading, but he'd prepared for it. He didn't panic. He told Chen the transaction was authorized, said the customer's relative had requested the withdrawal. Chen asked for documentation. Skoas said he'd send it. Then he sat down at his computer and created forged documents. He fabricated an authorization letter, made it look like the customer's family member had approved the withdrawal. He emailed the documents to Chen. She reviewed them. They looked legitimate, official signatures, proper formatting. Everything seemed in order. Chen closed the inquiry. Case resolved, but Skoas knew he'd been caught, or almost caught. He had to cover his tracks. Here's where Skoas made a critical mistake. Instead of stopping the fraud, he tried to fix it. He took $90,218 from his personal accounts and deposited it back into the customer's account, essentially returning the stolen money. But he kept more than $3,700 that he'd taken as a cash withdrawal from the same account. He thought if he returned most of the money, the problem would go away. It didn't. It just created more questions. Why would money disappear from an account and then reappear? Why would a branch manager have to fix a transaction? What exactly had happened? The internal audit team at Regions Bank started paying attention to Eric Jason Skoas. On another occasion, Skoas pulled a different version of the same scam. He told a Regions Bank employee that he'd messed up the payee name on a cashier's check, said he was looking for the reissued check to correct the error. Later, he followed up with the same employee, saying he'd tracked it down and the funds were back in the customer's account. Another lie, another cover-up. Again, Skoas returned money to the account to make the problem disappear. But again, he kept a cash withdrawal of more than $3,700. The pattern was becoming clear to bank investigators. Something was wrong with the Plank Road branch. Something was wrong with the branch manager. The formal investigation began. Regions Bank didn't immediately call federal authorities. They conducted their own internal review first. This is standard practice in the banking industry. When you suspect employee theft, you document everything before involving law enforcement. The audit team pulled transaction records for every account Skuest had touched in the past year. They reviewed email chains. They examined cashier's checks. They interviewed other branch employees. They contacted customers directly to verify transactions. And with every piece of evidence they gathered, the picture became clearer. Eric Jason Skuest wasn't making innocent mistakes. He wasn't having technical difficulties. He was systematically stealing from customers. The internal investigation identified 4 separate victim accounts, $257,000 in total losses. Dozens of fraudulent transactions, forged documents, false emails, an elaborate cover-up that had been running for over a year. April 2021, Regions Bank terminated Eric Jason Skuest's employment. After 11 years with the company, he was fired. No severance, no retirement party, no letter of recommendation, just termination for cause. Bank officials contacted the FBI. They also notified the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General because some of the fraud involved accounts tied to Social Security benefits. Federal investigators opened a criminal case. The United States Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Louisiana took the lead. The methodical process of building a federal embezzlement case began. Agents subpoenaed bank records. They interviewed Regions Bank employees. They tracked the money flows from customer accounts to Skuest's personal accounts to his creditors. They built a financial map that showed exactly where every stolen dollar went. Skuest knew he was under investigation. Federal agents don't show up quietly. When the FBI comes asking questions, word spreads. In a small community like Plaquemine, everyone would soon know. The respected bank manager was under investigation for theft, for betraying the trust of customers who'd relied on him, for violating the position he'd held for over a decade. Skuest hired a criminal defense attorney. They waited. The federal grand jury process moved forward. Prosecutors presented evidence, bank records, email trails, forged documents, witness testimony from Regions Bank employees, customer statements, financial analysis showing the stolen funds paying Skuest's personal bills. The case was overwhelming. April 16, 2024, a federal grand jury in the Middle District of Louisiana returned a 4-count indictment against Eric Jason Skuest. Count 1 charged embezzlement by a bank employee. Count 2 charged bank fraud. Count 3 charged another count of embezzlement. Count 4 charged another count of bank fraud. Each count was a felony. Each count carried a maximum sentence of 30 years in federal prison. Each count carried a potential fine of $1 million. If convicted on all counts, Skuest faced the possibility of dying in prison. The indictment was unsealed. Skuest was arrested. He appeared for his arraignment in federal court in Baton Rouge before United States District Judge John W. DeGravels. Skuest pleaded not guilty. His attorney said they would fight the charges. A trial date was set. But as the weeks passed and Skuest's legal team reviewed the evidence against him, the reality became clear. The government's case was ironclad. Bank records don't lie. Electronic trails don't disappear. Forged documents can be authenticated and proven fraudulent. Skuest's own emails created a documentary record of his lies. The money trail from customer accounts to his personal accounts to his creditors was indisputable. Financial forensics had mapped every transaction, every dollar, every lie. Fighting this case at trial would be suicide. The evidence was too strong. The jury would convict. The sentence after conviction at trial would be harsh. The only rational choice was to negotiate a plea deal. June 27, 2024. Eric Jason Skuest appeared again before Judge John W. DeGravels in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Louisiana. This time he came to plead guilty. The plea agreement had been negotiated with prosecutors. Skuest would plead guilty to 2 counts, embezzlement by a bank employee and bank fraud. In exchange, the other counts would be dismissed. He would cooperate with restitution. He would accept responsibility for his crimes, and he would face sentencing based on federal guidelines. Standing before Judge DeGravels, Schwest admitted what he had done. Yes, he had stolen money from customer accounts. Yes, he had created forged documents. Yes, he had lied to bank employees. Yes, he had abused his position of trust. Yes, he was guilty. The judge accepted the plea. Sentencing was scheduled for December. Between June and December 2024, Eric Jason Schwest waited. Federal sentencing is a complex process. A probation officer prepared a pre-sentence investigation report. It detailed Schwest's background, his education, his work history, his family situation, his financial condition, and most importantly, his criminal conduct. The report calculated the advisory sentencing guideline range based on the amount of money stolen, the abuse of trust, the vulnerability of the victims, and other factors. Prosecutors filed their sentencing memorandum arguing for a substantial prison term. Schwest's defense attorney filed a memorandum asking for leniency. Letters from family and friends described a man who made a terrible mistake, but the numbers didn't lie. $250,000 stolen from customers, elderly people, vulnerable people, people who trusted their bank manager. December 4, 2024, the sentencing hearing. Federal courthouses are imposing buildings designed to project the weight of justice. The Middle District Courthouse in Baton Rouge is no exception. Eric Jason Schwest walked into that courthouse knowing his freedom was ending. He sat at the defense table one final time. The prosecutor spoke first, detailed the harm Schwest had caused, the betrayal of trust, the violation of his position, the targeting of vulnerable customers, the systematic nature of the fraud over more than a year, the elaborate cover-up with forged documents and false emails. The prosecutor asked Judge DeGravels to impose a significant prison sentence to reflect the seriousness of the crimes and to deter other bank employees who might be tempted to steal. Schwest's defense attorney rose next, acknowledged the wrongdoing, but asked the court to consider mitigation. Schwest had pleaded guilty. He'd accepted responsibility. He'd shown remorse. He had no prior criminal history. He'd worked in banking for over a decade before this. One terrible decision had destroyed his career, his reputation, his life. The attorney asked for a sentence at the low end of the guidelines, maybe probation, maybe home confinement. Give him a chance to rebuild, to make amends, to pay restitution without being behind bars. The words hung in the courtroom air. Would the judge show mercy? Judge John W. DeGravels looked down from the bench. He'd presided over countless criminal cases in his career as a federal judge. He'd seen every type of defendant, every type of crime, and he knew what this case represented. A person in a position of trust who betrayed that trust for personal gain. A crime that undermines faith in financial institutions. A fraud that targeted vulnerable people. The judge spoke. He acknowledged Schwest's guilty plea, his lack of criminal history, his cooperation, but none of that outweighed the seriousness of what he'd done. Schwest exploited his position of trust at Regions Bank to embezzle funds from customers and deposit the money into his personal bank accounts. Over $250,000 stolen, multiple victims. A scheme that ran for over a year. Forged documents, false emails. A systematic betrayal. The sentence had to reflect the gravity of those crimes. Judge DeGravels sentenced Eric Jason Schwest to 30 months in federal prison, 2.5 years. The sentence was at the low end of the guideline range, reflecting Schwest's guilty plea and cooperation. But it was prison nonetheless, real federal prison where Schwest would spend every day for the next 2.5 years. After completing his prison term, Schwest would serve 2 years of supervised release. During that time, he'd have to report regularly to a probation officer, follow strict conditions, stay out of trouble. Any violation could send him back to prison. The judge also ordered Schwest to pay $86,376 in restitution to Regions Bank and the victims. The full amount of loss that hadn't been recovered. Every dollar would have to be repaid. Schwest stood there as the sentence was pronounced. Did he think about the moment it all started? That first theft in early 2020? Did he wonder if he could take it back? Did he think about the customers whose money he stole? The people who trusted him? The life he'd thrown away for $250,000 that he used to pay his mortgage and car loan. Whatever thoughts ran through Eric Jason Skoas' mind that December afternoon, they couldn't change reality. He was going to federal prison. The United States Marshals would soon transport him to begin his sentence. The investigation had been conducted by the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General and the FBI. Special agents from both agencies had spent months building the case, tracking transactions, interviewing witnesses, analyzing financial records. Assistant United States attorneys from the Middle District of Louisiana prosecuted the case. They'd presented the evidence to the grand jury, negotiated the plea agreement, argued for the prison sentence at sentencing. The collaborative effort of federal law enforcement and prosecutors had brought Eric Jason Skoas to justice, and Regions Bank made one thing clear in their public statements. Every customer who lost money in Skoas' fraud had been fully reimbursed. The bank covered the losses. Customers were made whole. Jeremy King, a spokesperson for Regions Bank, said it directly. All accounts impacted were reimbursed. Our company deeply values the trust people place in us. What happened here simply does not reflect the way our local Regions team is committed to serving the people and businesses of Baton Rouge. But the damage extended beyond the monetary losses. How many customers at the Plank Road branch now wondered if they could trust their bank? How many elderly account holders started checking their statements more carefully? How many people in the banking industry heard about the Skoas case and realized how easy it would be for a branch manager to commit similar fraud? The ripple effects of white-collar crime are often invisible but profound. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. Eric Jason Skoas didn't just steal money, he stole something far more valuable: confidence in the financial system. Where is Eric Jason Skoas today? Federal Bureau of Prisons records would show his location and expected release date. He's serving his 30-month sentence at a federal correctional institution somewhere in the United States. The Federal Bureau of Prisons assigns inmates to facilities based on security level, location, and space availability. Skoas would likely be in a minimum or low security facility given his nonviolent offense and lack of criminal history. He's inmate number assigned by the Bureau of Prisons, just another number in the federal prison system. His projected release date would be sometime in mid-2027, assuming good behavior and credit for time served. When he walks out of prison, he'll face 2 years of supervised release. He'll also face the reality of life as a convicted felon. No more banking career, no more positions of trust. Background checks will show his federal convictions. Finding employment will be difficult. Rebuilding his reputation will be impossible. The Skoas case should serve as a warning to financial institutions everywhere. Branch managers have enormous power over customer accounts. That power, without proper oversight, can be abused. Internal controls matter. Random audits matter. Segregation of duties matters. If one person has the ability to process transactions, create authorizing documents, and communicate with security without oversight, fraud becomes inevitable. Regions Bank learned that lesson the hard way. Since the Skoas case came to light, the bank has likely strengthened its internal controls. More oversight of branch managers, more frequent audits, more checks and balances. Systems designed to catch suspicious transactions before they reach the $250,000 mark. These changes can't undo the harm Skoas caused, but they might prevent the next Eric Jason Skoas from stealing customer money. For customers, the Skoas case offers a different lesson. Check your bank statements. Every month, every transaction. If something doesn't look right, ask questions immediately. Don't assume your bank manager is honest just because they seem trustworthy. Don't assume your money is safe just because it's in a bank. Vigilance is your best defense against fraud. The victims in the Skoas case might have caught the theft earlier if they'd been monitoring their accounts closely. Skoas targeted people who didn't check their statements frequently. He counted on their inattention. He counted on their trust. Don't make it easy for criminals. The federal sentencing guidelines for bank fraud exist for good reason. When employees steal from the institutions they work for, when they betray positions of trust, when they target vulnerable victims, the punishment must be severe. Eric Jason Skowit's 30-month sentence might seem short compared to the $250,000 he stole. But federal prison is not easy time. It's real prison with real consequences. And after prison, the collateral consequences of a federal conviction will follow Skowist for the rest of his life. He'll never work in banking again. He'll struggle to find any job that requires trust. His reputation is permanently destroyed. For $250,000 used to pay his mortgage and car loan, Eric Jason Skowist gave up everything. If you found this documentary compelling, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into white-collar crime, financial fraud, and the justice system. Leave a comment below. What do you think about the Skowist case? Was the 30-month sentence appropriate, or should it have been longer? Have you ever experienced fraud at your bank? Share your thoughts, and check out our other videos on bank fraud, embezzlement, and financial crimes. Stories of greed, betrayal, and justice. Stories that remind us that crime doesn't pay. Stories that show the human cost of white-collar crime. The Eric Jason Skowist case is closed, but the lessons it teaches remain. Trust is earned. Positions of authority come with responsibility. And when that trust is betrayed, when that responsibility is violated, justice will follow. Sometimes it takes months or years, but eventually the truth emerges, the evidence speaks, and the guilty face consequences.